One day I was praying and I was just thinking, why do I feel so stuck? Why do I feel like I'm not growing? And as I was asking God these questions, I was feeling something in my heart, and I remembered a verse. He brought me back to a verse that says in John chapter 5, verse 6, when Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" And when I remember this passage, I was in shock. I had no words. I was at a loss of words, and I was like, wow, you are so real. Because this might seem like a simple question, but to me it was everything. Because it's not only saying or asking the man, do you want to get well? Do you want to be healed? But he was asking me, do you even want to change? Do you even want to grow? Do you even want to pray more? Do you even want to read the Bible more? Do you want to be full of wisdom? Do you want to even be the one who preaches a word? Do you even want to be a teacher? Do you even want to be a preacher, a missionary? Do you even want to do anything for me? And so when I read this verse again, I was inspired. I was like, wow, you are real. And you're asking me, do I want to change? Because many times we say we're stuck. Many times we want to blame the people around us for being an impediment, for being something that keeps us from looking for God. When in reality, the most biggest and most largest obstacle and impediment that is in our lives to get closer to God is ourselves. Sometimes we blame our parents. Sometimes we blame the people at church. Sometimes we blame our friends, our family. But in reality, if you're not looking for God, that's your fault. And that's what God told me. Sometimes people think that God is going to give us a loving and merciful word all the time, and he's going to talk to us and sweet talk to us like if we're children. But it's time for us to grow up. We have to grow up and realize that it's not your friend, it's not your family, it's not the pastor, it's not the people at church. It's you. It's your fault you're not growing. And that's what God told me. It's your fault you're not growing. Do you even want to get well? And I started thinking about more of the Bible. And God put another thing in my heart, and he took me back to Matthew chapter 14, verse 29 through 30, which says that Jesus was walking on water. And when Peter saw him, he thought he was a ghost. And he said, if it is really you, Jesus, then take me to you. Let me walk on water the way you are walking on water. So Peter got off the boat and he started walking. And when he started walking, he was amazed. He said, wow, this is me really walking on water. But as he started to take his eyes off of Jesus and looking at the wind and the waves crashing, he was frightened and he started to drown. And everyone talks about how Peter stopped looking at Jesus, but no one wants to talk about how Jesus looked at Peter drowning and didn't do anything until Peter said, Jesus, save me. I need help. And that's something that I thought was so interesting, because Jesus is going to look at you drown. God is going to look at you drown. But he wants you to put your hand up and say, Jesus, save me. And some people think, wow, that is so wrong of Jesus to look at someone drown and not save them. It's so wrong for Jesus to just look at us drown in our battles and our trials, and he doesn't come to rescue us. But you know the reason he doesn't come to rescue us? Because you never told Jesus you want to get well. You never told Jesus, save me. You never told Jesus, I need help. And people say, why do I have to tell Jesus I need help, that I want to get well? He sees my condition. He knows I've been in this condition for a long time. Why didn't he help me before? Why do I have to ask? You know why? Because when we ask Jesus for help, we are recognizing we need God. He doesn't need us. We need Jesus. He doesn't need us. We need the Holy Spirit. He doesn't need us. When we ask for help, we're crying. When we ask for help, we're on our knees, we're begging, because we recognize that we are weak and we're only human. Jesus wants you to get closer to him. When we're in our needs, when we need help, we look for God more. And it's sad to say that sometimes God has to let horrible things happen in our lives so that we finally get close to him. And some people might think, oh, this is selfish of him. It's not. It's the most selfless thing he could ever do for all of us. Why? Because he's doing it so that you have salvation for an eternity, so that you're not rotting in hell for an eternity. He's doing it so that you can walk in a path of gold, so that you can live in a mansion, so that you can swim, so you can be by crystal waters. So it's not selfish at all. It's the most selfless thing that anyone can ever do. And so that's why I encourage you, look for God. Look for Jesus. Don't limit yourself. Don't be the biggest impediment in your life to look for God, because we have so many excuses that make no sense, mostly in the time that we're living in. We say, maybe God isn't real. We say, oh, I can't look for him. I don't have time. We say, school is too much. We say later. We say next year. We say tomorrow. But our tomorrow is then our another tomorrow. And we never get to that tomorrow, because every single tomorrow we're saying tomorrow. We have to cut out with the excuses. Yeah, we're young. We can have fun. We want to have fun. We want to live and experience life. But what's the point of doing all of that when in reality we're just living for our future here on earth, and we're not thinking about our future up in heaven, which is more important, because that's an eternity. Why work for something so temporary when you know there's an eternity that's coming after it? And if you have a sucky eternity that is spent in hell, rotting in hell and stench and darkness and evil, what's the point of looking forward to this life anyway, if you know that your eternity is going to be in hell? Working now for God is the best thing ever. Even if we suffer, we still feel peace. Even if we're suffering, we still feel happy. Because God. And even after all of this suffering and mixture of happiness and peace, after this is going to be even more better if we have salvation. Because we're not going to only be happy and peaceful again, but we're going to have absolutely no suffering, no sicknesses, no trials, no battles. And to me, that's the best thing and the best reward I could ever have for having such a temporary life that I've worked so little on, but God is taking so greatly. So I encourage you to pray every day. I encourage you to look for God. I encourage you to read the Bible, because some people say, when I pray, God doesn't listen. When I pray, God doesn't want to answer. But that's not true. If you pray every day, if you look for him, he's going to answer. If you knock, he'll open the door. He'll give you the key so you can open it. He'll do anything for you to get closer to him. So stop with the excuses. It's not God's fault that you are not getting close to him. It's your fault, because he's holy. Make yourself holy. If you want to get close to him, you'll do anything you need to do in order to get close to him. It's not impossible. Just pray every day. When I remember that I was at my weakest states. I was praying last night at 3 a.m. because I like to look for God in the middle of the night, because I think that's the most intimate time that you can look for God. And as I was praying, I was remembering, and I was like, God, you know what? You never permitted me to not pray. Because even when I was starting out, I remember in 2016 when I was starting to look for God, I was going through a lot. I was depressed. I was going through problems with friendships, relationship problems, and it was horrible. I was depressed. And even though I was going through that and God was slowly changing me because I was having dreams and experiences and encounters with Him and even diabolical things, I never stopped praying ever since I started to get to know God. I would pray in the morning, I would pray in the night. Sometimes I would forget to pray before I would eat, but I would pray. And then ever since I started in 2016, I've never stopped. Sure, there's some nights, really rare, when I would fall asleep and I would forget to pray because of how tired I was. But when it was my decision and I knew I had to pray, I would always pray. Sometimes I would be mad. Sometimes I would be frustrated. Sometimes I would be sad. Sometimes I was so fed up with all of the problems that I had, and even in my highest spiritual state. I was going through a battle and I was frustrated and I felt annoyed that I even had to go through what I was going through. But even though I felt that way, I got on my knees and I started to pray because I knew it wasn't God's fault. Because those were my consequences. That was my test. That was my trial. And there have been so many times where I didn't want to pray, or I have been in a rush, but I made myself get on my knees, even if it was for 10 seconds, even if it was for a minute or an hour, how much time it was, I would never stop praying. Even if I felt like He wasn't listening because of my state of mind and my heart, I still got on my knees because I can't stand going to sleep or waking up and going on with my day acting like God isn't there looking at me. I think that is the most disrespectful thing I could ever do to God, to pretend He's not there, to ignore Him when I open my eyes, to ignore Him as I'm falling asleep, because I have to be thankful. We have to be grateful for everything that we have in this world. Even if we're frustrated, depressed, mad, sad, whatever it is, I think it is so rude to just pretend like God isn't there. But that's just me. And thank God that is in me. Thank God that I have that recognition, that realization. And I'm praying for everyone to have that same recognition, because that is a gift from God. I wasn't born with that. God gave that to me ever since He changed me. And I believe that He can do that with anyone He wants to. And I believe that if you ask for it, He will give it to you. And so I'm going to finish off with this. John 5:6. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, He asked him, "Do you want to get well?"